Welcome guys, I'm Ignat, work at 1337, and today I'm going to talk about asserting project health using unit tests. So what is asserting project health using unit tests? I don't know. What is it? Any ideas? Basically it's a project has a lot of rules and a statement is code rules are easy to formulate in a team, like model view controller pattern, inversion of control, dependency injection, we encapsulate stuff. There are other rules, reducing logic in views when you're building web applications. Don't copy paste code, for example. Keep files small. Don't access the database from just anywhere. Organize code in different projects and assemblies. These are quite opinionated rules, some of them at least, and you probably have other rules in your projects. Do you have any examples?
Yes, but we shouldn't mention them.
Okay. Well, these are some examples, and I'm going to talk about a few rules that we have and how we are using unit tests to make sure that they are followed. And this talk is not about what those rules are, it's basically once you have those rules, what do you do? So statement 2, rules are easy to follow once formulated. So an example is this mogwai, don't feed it after midnight. Easy, right? Wrong. It turns into a gremlin when you feed it after midnight. So how do we maintain the project health? How do we make sure the rules aren't broken, and if they are broken that we fix it and stuff? Same as everything, we reduce time until feedback, and one way to do that is by unit testing. So I'm going to go through a few scenarios and show how, with examples, how you can use unit tests for fixing this. One scenario is when you share the DLL, you only want to expose the right stuff. You don't want to expose internal things, things that the consumer shouldn't know about or shouldn't use. So I'm going to show an example where you can create and get orders. Tell me if I'm going too fast, because I feel like I'm going quite fast. Should I slow down? Yeah, I'm going to slow down. So here we have an assembly order service, and we have a test that calls when analyzing exported types, should export all expected types and should not export any other types. And we have a whitelist. These are the types that we want to expose. These are the reasons that we want to expose them. And this is the magic of the test, where you get the assembly, ask for exported types, and then you just see that it matches your whitelist. So quite simple test. Any questions? We could try and run it. Failing. Weird. Okay. Expected collection to be empty because no unexpected types should be exported. This is a list of the unexpected types. Internal stuff. We're exposing internal stuff. Let's fix it. This should be internal. Let's try again. Green. So normally a build server would tell you when you're breaking the rules, in this case. And then you would have to fix the list or fix the leaking of internal stuff. Okay? Any questions?
How do you keep this list of special rules up to date?
Basically, since we have the unit testing in our build server, and that's the step next after building, we are forced to keep the test screen to be able to deploy anything. So as soon as it breaks, we have to take action. And then you could find out yourself, oh, I broke the rule, or this should be exposed, or then you have to involve the team and update the test or update the code. So basically a double check on what you expose. All right. Another scenario, the naming of things. All view models should be easy to spot, was a scenario that we had. So we decided that all classes of type implementing iViewModel should end with viewModel suffix. Kind of Hungarian notation, but still. So how do you manage that? Let's see if I can find the code. So we get the interface we're interested in, take the assembly, and we see that all classes that implement iViewModel should end with viewModel. So we could look into this type naming conversions checker. So basically,
this is your class.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Where is the fun stuff? Yeah, basically we get all the types in the assembly. We apply a filter, and that filter is they have to implement iViewModel. And then we see if there are any wrongly named types, any types not ending with viewModel. And if we have any of those, we fail the test. All right. Any questions about this? Does this seem useful so far?
Yeah.
Scenario 3. In our project we have a few assemblies, a few projects, and we have rules for how those projects should interact with each other. So projects in solution need to have good relationships. They need to speak to the right projects, and some projects they are not allowed to reference at all. So we have an example where we want to keep our view models anemic. Do you know what anemic is? They should contain as little logic as possible. They basically all the calculations, all the business logic we want to be finished once we get to the view. So that's why we keep them anemic as opposed to where you have object-oriented coding where the models have a lot of knowledge about the business logic. I'm going to show example 3. So when we're analyzing the view model assembly, which we have, let's see, we have a special assembly for our view models, and we say it should have no project references at all. So how do we achieve this? You could try to do it with like reflection, seeing what kind of references does this assembly have. But the problem is that to get all dependent assemblies into the app domain, you have to actually use code that needs them, because it's not going to be loaded up once the application starts. And we don't actually want to run any code just to know if it's referencing anything. So what we do instead is that we have a project file provider, and we get the project file for Let's Store View Models, which is this file. And here we actually can find out what is it referencing, what isn't it referencing. So let's look into this project file. So here we get a stream with the project file. And basically we read up, well, for all references, get assembly name. For all project references, get assembly name. And then we expose them as lists here. So basically, in the test, we open the vModel project file, and we see project reference assembly names count should be 0. So what we're saying is this view model project should contain view models. We have other tests that say it should only contain view models and it shouldn't have any dependencies to anything else, because then it's starting to do stuff, and we don't want view models to do anything. We just want to put stuff in them. So that's example 3. Any thoughts or questions?
Do you actually test the project file provider in some way? Like I'm thinking about the solutions files depending on the different versions of Visual Studio.
This is quite tied to CS profiles. So it's not going to work with project JSON, for example.
Mm-hmm.
This is a homemade file. So you'd probably need to, I don't know how references work, if it's the same way, but maybe you can make a project JSON file reader in that case.
Mm.
But this works for all .NET versions that we are using, basically. And just under the hood, to get to the project file, we actually
include it in the project.
Yeah, as an embedded resource.
Mm.
So let's.
Inception.
Where is it? Let's see. Yeah, here it is. Link project files. Here are the project files, linked as embedded resources, so they get baked into the unit test project. And that's to avoid I/O when running the tests, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is it possible to get all of these data by reflection? Like we just load the metadata of the assembly and check everything there?
I went with that approach first, but then I had problems with all dependent assemblies weren't getting loaded until they were needed. So basically you would have to invoke code to get them loaded into the app domain, or at least that's where I stopped and went for this low-level approach of reading the file, and it worked so well that I didn't look into it much more.
Okay.
But that might be a possibility, actually.
Loading the assembly is very easy. Just load assembly. As long as you know which assemblies to load.
Yeah, and then you have to maybe read the project files to know which to load, and then
You need to search inside the assembly. So it's a cool challenge, I would say.
yeah. So this is very low level, but it actually works, because yeah, it works.
Mm-hmm.
So that was keeping view models anemic and simple. Another scenario, keeping MVC views neat. So nice, elegant, awesome, stupid. How do you do that? One thing that we wanted to do was in MVC, I don't know when they included it, maybe in MVC 3, they included something called display templates, where you can find a view from a class type, basically. And we kind of like that one-to-one connection between a view model and a view, that every view model has a view, every view has a view model. So we wanted to have a one-one mapping. Let's see if you can find it. A view for every view model. Here we have the project file provider. We read the project file, and we have shared display templates. We can look into how that works. But basically, we get the name of all view models, and then we take all those view models, remove all the views that are matching, and we should get no view models left. So share display templates is just finding all the content which matches shared display templates, and ends with CSHTML. Yeah. So quite low level again, but it works.
I have another question. Are you using link to XML? It looks like you're manually trying to analyze attributes and stuff like this.
Link to XML.
Just to parse project files.
There is an API for it as well, but you can there is an XSD for CS project files. However, it's huge. There are a huge number of things that you need to take care of if you look at the what these kind of files can do. So it's
Well, we're using X element in the link namespace, so I guess it would be a possibility.
Because it's just feeling, but just to get all the references, basically just get elements in XML document. It should be like 2 lines of code, basically.
Yeah.
It's my just feeling. I don't know.
Yeah, basically it is these 2 lines of code,
Oh, okay.
and then we don't want the version and the full name and stuff, so some string modification to just get what we need.
Okay.
So it's not a lot of code actually. This file is 67 lines.
It looks like you're using linked XML if you go top of where you call the descendants.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So a view for every view model. I can show you. Here are view models. And since we have this test, we can always know that we have display templates for them, which are one-to-one mapped. And that's kind of nice.
I have a question. It's like my pain question regarding view models. If, for example, you need to create view model, but like with asynchronous stuff, it's not possible to do it in the constructor. So you like, do you have any like suggestions? What do you use if you need some async stuff just to initialize your view model?
Let's look at this quickly. But we have view model factories for our view models. And
yeah, right, okay.
And here we could have weights and stuff.
You decided to go with the factors because it could be possible to use like factory method for them.
Yeah.
And then you just divide it by 2 entities in your project, basically, because you have only view models and all the logic of creating this view model is inside this view model in some static code. Instead of factory, just static method on the view model itself.
Yeah, that's possible. We decided to use factories basically to separate creation of view models from the actual view models and to be able to like combine factories, nested factories. Like for example, this purchase ebook view model takes the help of a page view model factory and then does its own things. Maybe it's possible with the factory method as well. Those are 2 rules, and we decided on this rule, basically.
Okay.
So, example 5, only use view models as view models. Only use view models as view models. Don't use anything else. Don't send anything else to the view.
Even int?
Even int. We haven't found a use where we want to send an int to a view, actually. And then if you do, you could make a view model holding an int, I guess.
Yeah.
Still, it's not about if the rule is correct or not, it's a rule that we have. So what I'm talking about is what kind of model does this view expect, and it should always be a view model. This is actually not a unit test, but I found that it was quite nice anyway. So what we did here was we made an action filter. When an action is executed in MVC, if the result is null, we're fine. But if it's not null, it has to be a view model, or else we throw an exception. So basically, quick feedback if you're not using view models. Any questions?
How do you apply this?
But this is not sorry.
How we apply it? We
It's like
add it as a global filter. So it's run on every action.
No, but I have a question. It should be conditional compiling because it should not be in release mode, right? Because it's just for debugging.
Well, Yeah, you could argue that we could remove it if it's not debug. That's true. Right now we have it in, and that's like a performance loss, I guess.
Yeah, some.
That's true. So now we can only use view models as view models. Cool. Scenario 5, control dependencies to legacy code. So we don't want to have like 15 touch points to legacy code, because then when we actually manage to kill the beast, we have 15 places to fix. So we want to encapsulate that integration. Or control dependencies to code I didn't write. Or NuGet packages. Because NuGet, we might want to switch out the NuGet package to something cooler, newer, something like that. So we have an example of this where we want to be able to log throughout the application without actually knowing about what logging framework we're using. So let's see. Here we have 2 NuGet packages. We have one logging package and then another package for the interface. So basically this is just the contract for logging, and here's one implementation of that interface which uses nlog. And we set this up in our inversion control container, which happens to be structure map. So we say for ilogger, use our nlog logger, and for the string parameter in the constructor, we want to get the full name of the class requesting the ilogger, and it's transient, so every service gets its own logger. And this is set up in the composite root. So this one has both the implementation and the interface. But if we look at a usage in another project, the view model factory project, then we're logging some tracing like creating page view model for type T. And this one uses ilogger in the interface package. But if we look at the references, we don't actually have the implementation here. So what the implementation they use is selected by the web project. So that's... Any questions about that?
So it's real open code principle used here.
I guess, yeah. And this way, if we want to switch to log4net, then we only have to care about setting up ilogger in our application.
I have a question regarding dependency injection of logger. It's not in a single scope, right? You said it's transient.
It's transient, yeah.
Why not a singleton? It's just a logger for the application.
Well, basically in... let's find this class. Basically in nlog, you get a logger by name, and we use the name of the class that is logging. And that way you can set up filters for certain classes. We want everything from other classes, we only want error, etc. So it's an nlog thing where we want to know which class is logging this way. And that way we don't have to...
And you also don't have concurrency issues or anything.
But the
Why
these
the
are
logger
if you take a look at the like in the memory there are
here
several
you
instances
concurrency
of the
issues
same
for
logger, right? Running for the
class
second
that
or same.
Yeah, that's possible, yeah. Yeah.
Question right now, how it's
Yeah,
configured
that's
right now.
the class.
It's transient, so every time a service is created, it gets its own new logger.
And a service is only created when? Because here you've got a static.
Yeah, it's on every request, actually. And it's possible that nlog handles this in the background and sends up the same logger every time. But our wrapping is always a new class. and it's been working well.
It's not a bottleneck, right? It's
Not that I know of, but ask me in a few months. We've been using this for a bit and no issues. So basically, this is the same as if you would... another school of nlog is to get current class logger, which basically is the same thing that you create a class logger every time you get a new instance. So, okay.
Isn't there like a way to just attach it from the outside? Do you have to use a logger variable every time? Have you thought about it?
Where? In what class?
In
Let's see if we can find the code. Is it in the page? Human factor. Do you mean here?
yeah,
Basically,
like
and
instead of using iLogger, like logger variable to
do you mean this?
yeah
Yeah.
to kind of attach it from the outside and just have it log everything that you do.
Ah, yeah, like aspect-oriented program. Yeah, we have that in some projects, but not all projects. Yeah. I have one more thing to show you, if that's okay. And that's basically how do we make sure that the ViewModel factory assembly doesn't start using the actual implementation, referencing that actual implementation. And for this we have even more tests using the project file reader. So basically what we have done is that we have linked in all our projects, and we have whitelists for allowed project references and whitelists for allowed DLL references, the interesting ones. So we have said that we are interested in these DLL references. So system web, logging interface, logging, some other NuGet packages. And you can't use these interesting DLL references without breaking a test unless you say that they are allowed for a project. So the web project can have these project references, these DLL references, etc., etc. And here you can see view models is quite stupid, for example. And this also works quite well. So as soon as you add a project reference or you add a DLL reference that we care about, this test goes red, and then you have to decide, should this reference really be added? Then you have to update the test. So this is basically our definition, our whitelist of what is allowed.
So you really need to think.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if you add something here, you should probably check with at least another team member, because there might be a reason that it's not included in the whitelist.
It is possible to remove write permissions for these files without a special key which combines from two persons at least.
Yeah,
You
nuclear.
can see this check-in in Git and just remove it. Whoever wanted to comment.
Yeah, it's still the honor system, but we have these tests not to like force someone to follow the pattern. It's more to alert someone when they are breaking a pattern. So we believe that in a few months, when team members have changed, maybe these code rules that we thought were super easy to understand are quite confusing. But if a test goes red and a test says you broke this rule because you added this reference, then there's a higher possibility that the rule actually survives and lives on.
But seriously, how do you keep it secure so no one, instead of fixing the shit, changes the actual test for that?
I'll let you know when it becomes a problem. So far, actually, we haven't had any issues with this.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's mostly a people problem rather than a technical problem.
Exactly.
Yeah, but you still can secure yourself and inform the
No, you
user.
can't.
One thing that we're doing actually is for everything we do, we have code reviews. So at least 2 people have to approve it. But that might not be enough. So Another thing you can do is to go through the architecture or go through the whole code base together, maybe once a month or something. This happens to be a project that we're currently not working on, but when we did, we had like meetings and technical demos, code demos, pretty much every week when we set these rules. And it worked quite well.
This is very nice also when a new member joins the team. Right, even if he doesn't know the rules and he tries to break them, it will have a warning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he can discuss it with somebody that knows about it, and he understands it, but it doesn't break because he doesn't know yet, right?
Yeah, so you get really fast feedback.
You don't have any handwritten rules somewhere, right, in the document, so everybody can read and be prepared.
We do, but the issue I have with the documentation is that it's often, well, code rule documentation is often too far away from the code. And then it gets outdated, but this can't get outdated because then it would get read.
Yeah.
So, thanks guys.